What's going on, competitors? Get ready to compete. Compete is going to disrupt the world of sports gaming by solving some of the most painful sticking points for players, created by out-of-touch gaming monopolies that are currently ruining the fun with oppressive and abusive barriers to entry. Compete was built from its foundation to cut the locks off the gym doors, opening up the world of sports gaming for everyone in the world to have access to play together regardless of their device. By utilizing blockchain to provide real ownership of game assets, Compete is creating true play-to-earn opportunities within a sustainable tokenomics model. Look, in sports, there is nothing greater than a true underdog story, and Compete will be the first game to push back against the sports gaming industry by providing a home for everyone to experience their favorite sports game modes with their friends. I'm excited to take this opportunity to share with you a behind-the-scenes look at the current alpha build for Compete. Over the course of the tour, we're going to go over a couple of things, including Justin's inspiration for building Compete, the problems with sports gaming that we're aiming to solve, where we're at in terms of our current development progress, and what our development priorities are moving forward. So let's log in and get this tour started. Alright, now that we're here in the lobby, I want to give you a brief introduction to Compete so that the rest of the tour is a little bit easier to follow. As a broad overview, there's a few steps involved with playing Compete. Number one is to create your player avatar like you see in the middle of the screen there, with our industry-leading character customizer. Next, you'll select your physical and skill attributes for each game mode to customize your gameplay experience. Then, you'll take to Mizuku Island, the home of Compete, and compete with your friends across a variety of sports game modes, which will include Battle Royale, basketball, kart racing, and golf to start. Along the way, you'll earn game experience, which will unlock a rotating, limited supply of collectible game assets. Those game assets for blockchain players are going to be delivered as ERC 1155 NFTs. And lastly, you'll have the opportunity to buy, sell, and trade those collected game assets with other players on our secondary marketplace called the Bazaar. Now, so far, this might sound like pretty big talk. So how are we going to deliver on this vision? Well, the build that you're looking at here is the product of 20 months of hard work by Modernize Games. Modernize Games, for those of you that don't know, is a game studio based in San Diego, California. It was started by Justin Meister, who's our owner, CEO, and the game designer for Compete. Justin's a marketing entrepreneur and an ex-pro gamer, and we'll get into his inspiration for making Compete here in just a second. The game build that we have here in front of us is the result of thousands of hours of work provided by our dedicated team of 15 plus developers and artists, with over $1 million in funding already spent by Justin. So how far along are we into developing that vision? Well, the proof's in the pudding, as they say. So let's dig through the menus and explore how things are looking right now. Along the way, I'm going to give you some insight into where our development priorities are headed next. And first, we'll start in the lobby. The first thing to take a look at on the right-hand side is going to be our friends list. Obviously, if we're making a multiplayer video game, especially a sports game, you're going to need the opportunity to play with your friends. And this was the biggest inspiration that Justin had when it came to making Compete. Just a quick backstory, I've been working for Justin for a long time, and I know every year around September when the new NBA 2K comes out, I'm not going to hear from him for a couple of months. He really dives into it. He loves the game. He always has. So when he called me up one day in September of 2020, and he wasn't in that typical good, lighthearted mood that I normally hear Justin in, I knew something was wrong. Something was up. Well, as it turns out, NBA 2K20 had come out, and they botched the release. And really, the bottom line was the game wasn't worth buying again. Now, this wasn't so much an issue for Justin. He was going to buy the game either way. But the problem was that his friends that he had enjoyed playing with over the last 15 or 20 years, those guys that he had kept in touch with through gaming, there's no way that they were going to buy this new NBA 2K game. And really, it highlighted a bigger problem with gaming. Right now, if you want to play video games with your friends, especially sports games, there is a whole bunch of barriers to entry. You guys are going to need the same console. You're going to need the same generation of the same console. So if I'm on an old Xbox and you're on a new Xbox, it's not going to work. You need to both have the same game, the same year of the same game. So every year NBA 2K comes out with a brand new title and it costs $70. And after a year they come out with a new one and the old game becomes obsolete. So you can see the issue here is that in order to actually play with your friends, especially in sports games, there's all these massive barriers to entry. Now obviously this was a reason that Justin was playing these sports games all along, to hang out with his buddies and have fun. So this was a serious problem. So, in true Justin style, he decided to look into it and see if he could do it better. That entrepreneurial spirit, as you could say. And it turns out after talking to some Unreal Engine developers for a couple of weeks and getting a lay of the land for game development, he realized that, you know what? I'm not a game developer, but I can certainly hire game developers and I can manage them, and we can build this game just like anyone else. So, that's what we did. Justin pushed his chips into the middle of the table, put his money where his mouth is. He reassigned most all of our staff at Modernized Marketing to start working on this game build in one form or another, and we were off to the races. But when you see this friends list on the right hand side of the screen, just realize this is the most important part of the game for Compete. This is why we are building what we're building. We want sports games to be accessible to everyone so that they can play with their friends regardless of their device, because at the end of the day, that's what gaming is about, and that's what the community wants. So you can see here that you're able to add new friends at any time. You're able to see who's online. If my buddy CK Prime was online here, I could invite him pretty easily to my party. And when he dropped into my party, he'd show up right here, and you'd be able to hear his voice. So our voice chat is also working. The next thing that I want to point out is our ticker along the bottom. If you've ever seen ESPN, you know where this inspiration comes from. We're not sure exactly what we're going to be putting down here yet, but the basis for the idea is that we want to provide a bunch of information that players are looking for really conveniently, so that they have less of a reason to leave the game. Next, on the bottom left, you can see that we have the option to change the game modes. And this is the first opportunity for me to point out that there are some things about this alpha build that are going to look a little bit different than from the beta or the final game release. So as you can see here, we've got a Battle Royale small, Basketball small, Kart Racing small, and then we've got a big version as well. What this allows us to do is to run smaller versions of our matchmaking, say a 2v2, when we're doing things like showing the game on tours. But when we want to test the full game mode, so with Battle Royale, that would be 15 players, we're able to do that as well. So just to note that as we go through this tour, you're going to see a few different places where we've made some custom changes to accommodate for the tours, and also just to accommodate for the fact that we are still in alpha development. So as you can see, we've got kart racing, basketball, battle royale. We've also got the basis for our community game mode built. This is the closest thing to a metaverse that Compete will get to, and it'll allow players to own their own house, play with their assets that they've collected, and hang out with their friends in a less competitive, non-matchmaking setting. So if you want to go to the basketball courts and shoot hoops with your buddies with the new basketball you just unlocked, you're able to do that here in Community. Lastly, we have our practice game mode, which will give you the option to go in by yourself, practice shooting the guns at some AI, practice driving your kart around a smaller, more modified track, and dribble around in the gym and take some shots. This is where you can really hone in your skills before you jump into matchmaking. Alrighty, next we've got what I like to unofficially call the bulletin board for Compete, which is in the upper left here. This is basically going to be a display of a few of the most recent blog posts or interesting articles that players might want to check out. So those will all be linked here conveniently so that players can stay up to date with what's going on in Compete. Alright, and the last thing that I want to point out is our profile up at the top. So first things first, you can see that we have a profile picture for ourselves. You can see that I got a couple great looking friends down here as well. Nextly, we have our game experience gauges for both the fame and ticket reward systems. We'll get into the details on that in just a second. Last thing that I want to point out in the upper right is of course the Compete token, which is the backbone of the Compete game economy for crypto players. When you create an account on Compete for our blockchain crypto build, you're going to be integrating a wallet with that account. That wallet will hold your Compete token, which you'll use at the Bazaar and will be shown here. And it'll also hold your ERC 1155 game assets that you've collected. So that pretty much wraps things up on the lobby, gives you an idea of what we're looking at here. Now let's dive into the menus a little more deeply and see what kind of other features we have going in Compete. First, we'll start in the locker. Alright, welcome to the Compete locker, where you have the tools to craft your competitor into whoever you want to be. As you can see, we've got the identity customizer, the DNA, and the wardrobe outfits. And between these three sections, you're going to be able to turn this competitor here into whoever you want to be. So to start, let's take a look at our identity customizer. This has been a huge undertaking and it's something that we're really proud of. And to give you a little bit of a backstory as to why this customizer is so important to us, I want to just share this quick story with you. So as I mentioned, Justin's a big NBA 2K gamer, and NBA 2K has a really detailed character customizer, which allows you to create pretty much anyone that you want to be. Now, you may or may not know, when you buy NBA 2K, you can immediately sign up to be LeBron James. You can take him to the courts. But instead, what Justin's noticed increasingly over the last few years is that players are more interested in building themselves, in creating someone that they can relate to in the game, building up those skills, and creating an identity within the game. So we realized really early on that this was something that was important to players, and it was an experience we wanted to replicate and compete. So as you can see here, we started with 9 preset characters. These are all characters that our character artist Mark has made. And they're meant to give you a place to start. So we'll start with number 8 here. He's my favorite guy. And we'll go to create from preset. And now that we're in the customizer, I want to go through a couple of the options. Of course, the most important thing is to give ourselves a name. Next, we'll select our gender. Right now, we only have the male version set up, but the female version will be done in short order. We're looking forward to introducing that as soon as it's ready. Next, we'll go down to the age. And this is the first place that you can really see the level of detail that our customizer provides. As I slide this across, you're going to see wrinkles start to come into his face. And as I slide it back, they leave. Now, of course, we have the skin tone selection here, which we'll continue to add more into the future. And when we get into the morphs, this is really where the magic starts to happen. So we'll start up here, and I want you to look in this space right between the eyebrows here. As I morph these, you're going to notice that we're able to move pretty much every muscle on the face in that location. Now, when you combine this morphability through all the different sections of the face that you see here on the left, it really and truly does give you the ability to make pretty much anyone you want with this customizer. So if you want a really cool example of how powerful this thing is, next time you're on Twitter, go look at Justin or KOMPETE's profile picture. That was made specifically with our customizer by our character artist Mark, just using a couple of pictures that Justin provided. And I would say it looks a lot like him. You'll have to check and be the judge for yourself, but I think you're going to be pretty impressed. So as you can see here, we've got all sorts of different places that you can morph your character. I'm not going to spend all the time going through them now, but one that I specifically did want to point out is my favorite down here, the expression. So as you can see right now, we've got our competitive anger turned up quite a bit. But if we turned it down, and you can see that there's all these different places that we're able to morph the expression on the face. Next, if we go back to our locker, we'll open up the DNA. This is the section where you'll select the physical attributes of your character, because after all, the face is the most recognizable part of you, but it's not the only part. So we've built in the opportunity for players to adjust their height, their weight, and we'll give you a side profile here so you can see. And also their muscle mass. So what I think is one of the coolest features of our DNA, and what I think is going to be really fun for players, is that as you change your physical attributes, you're going to see that its effect on your gameplay is going to be noticeable. So if you come down here and you're real small, you're going to be flying around that Battle Royale map. You're going to be super fast. You're going to accelerate really quickly. You might climb faster, but you're not going to have as much strength. And as a result, your handling of those bigger machine guns might not be quite as good. That big Desert Eagle style pistol might be a little bit tougher to aim. On the flip side, if you bring your character way up to the top, well, you're going to have a lot more control over those weapons. Your aim is going to be a little bit easier, but of course, you're not going to be running around quite as fast. So our goal here is to balance gameplay so that you can play as any of these different styles of builds. They'll all have unique challenges and unique strengths. And in time, players will be able to experiment, see how they want to play, and test out a whole bunch of different game builds. As you can see on the left, you're able to morph all of these independently. So if you want to be the big guy under the hoop for basketball, but you want to come down here and you want to be the short, quick guy in Battle Royale, that's totally welcome. And if you changed your mind tomorrow, you can do it then too. None of these are locked into place, and you're always able to change them as you go. Lastly, of course, we have the wardrobe and the outfits. So we've taken the Fortnite model for our game assets, in that all of our game assets are cosmetic only. So just to give you a clear example, if you were to unlock one of our super cool looking race carts, Yeah, it's going to look really cool, but it's not actually going to go any faster or take those turns any better than the original base cart that everyone starts with. Now we're going to get into why this is so important in a minute, but for now, all you need to know is that our game assets are totally cosmetic and there's no pay to win and compete. So no one's getting the upper edge because they have a little bit more money to spend on the front end. Now that we're looking at the wardrobe, let's take a look at what we offer. Of course, we got to give you some clothes to start, so we've got a small selection of pretty basic clothes in here. We've got the hoodie, we've got the t-shirt, we've got the tank top. You can see there's slight little adjustments that need to be made with the clothes. Remember, this is an alpha build, so we're still dialing that stuff in. Now, one of our big visions for Compete is that players are really going to get into collecting these game assets and building up their wardrobe. So as I mentioned, everyone's going to start with a couple of assets. They're all going to be the same. But if you want to get out of this white noob suit and get into something a little more stylish, you're going to have to start playing the game, unlocking the assets, or trading on the Bazaar. So to give you a quick example of how powerful this might be, let's take a look at our bottoms here. And you can see that our jeans immediately give us a better look to our character. And I don't know about you, but I would way rather roll into the matchmaking with these pair of jeans on than with those white joggers. As far as where these game assets are stored, for crypto players, these are obviously all going to be ERC 1155 NFTs. And so any of those Compete game asset NFTs that you have in your linked wallet are going to display here in your wardrobe and be available for use. Now the next logical question is, okay, this is super cool, but where do these assets come from? So there's 4 different spots, and we're going to go through them right now. The first one that we'll look at is our game shops. All right, welcome to the Compete game shops. As you can see here, there's a couple different options for you. We've got our daily shop, our winter shop, our general shop, and our face shop. We're actually going to start here in general shop. You can see that there's not a whole lot hooked up here yet because we haven't plugged the assets into the game. But the general concept here is that when you fire up Compete for the first time and you're looking to get out of that white suit, you obviously are going to have to earn, trade, or buy some of those game assets. But we want everyone to have the opportunity to start that collection somewhere pretty quickly. After all, when you sign on, you don't want to have to play a whole bunch or spend a whole bunch of money in order to get something. So the general shop is our solution to that. The idea for this is that we want people to start building out their collection somewhere. And this general shop is a good place for people to get their feet wet and start feeling what it's like to building out that collection. Next, we'll go to our daily shop. As you can see here, this is going to be time limited. And this is the first place that you notice scarcity built into the Compete game assets. Now, scarcity is going to be a huge driving factor of the value of Compete game assets. And as such, we've introduced scarcity about as many places as we can. So in the case of the daily shop, each of these items is going to be available for 24 hours only and then never available again. This is going to limit the number of those assets that are in circulation. And as you can see here, you're able to purchase those assets or gift it to a friend. This is a good opportunity for me to point out this Ethereum symbol here. You might be wondering, hey, where's the Compete token? The reason for this is that we've realized that players' initial purchases from Compete should be made in Ethereum. Now the reason for this is that if players are paying Compete the game in Compete token, it's going to force Compete to sell those Compete tokens if we want to turn it into revenue that we can spend on development and marketing. And so by taking Ethereum for those initial game purchases, we're able to avoid that. Next, we have our winner shop. As you can see here, we've got 75, 297, and 575. These numbers are just kind of arbitrary right now, they're guesses, but the general theme here is going to be that as you accumulate wins during your Compete season, you're going to unlock the ability to buy these increasingly rare, increasingly exclusive assets. Now, as a general trend for Compete, the harder the asset is to unlock, the more detail, the more attention is going to be put into it. And so we want these top-end assets that are really hard to earn to be really, really attractive on the secondary market. So these top-end assets are going to be the first place that we introduce partnerships with, let's say, other brands or other NFT projects. Lastly, we've got our face section, which is going to sell tokenized version of faces that you can use in-game. So if you don't have the time to click through that customizer and make who you want to make, and maybe you want to stand out from the crowd a little bit, some of whom will be using those preset faces, you'll be able to come in here and buy more exclusive faces that are made custom by our character artist, Mark. And so with that, that's going to wrap up our tour of the Compete game shops. The next place we're going to go take a look is the ticket. Alrighty, welcome to the Compete ticket. This is very similar to what a lot of games call a battle pass. And what it is a paid game experience progression system. You can see here that it'll last 30 days at a time. All you got to do to participate is click this buy now button, or you can gift to a friend. And what it'll do is allow players to start working through this progression system. So as they earn game experience over the course of the 30 days, they'll start to unlock these assets along the way. These assets are free, of course. They'll be airdropped to them as they're unlocked. And what this is going to do is introduce a whole bunch of new game assets into circulation, as well as give players something to work towards, something to earn, and a reason to keep playing Compete. Now the next section that I want to jump over to is over here in Career, and it's called our Fame Rewards system. So as you can see here, we've got our Fame Reward system. The interface isn't quite set up for it yet, but you can envision it as looking pretty similar to the ticket that we just looked at. There's a few big differences between the Fame system and the ticket system though. Number one is that the Fame system is completely free. Number two is that it's going to be a lot longer term. So either 4 months or 6 months, we're not quite sure yet. And lastly, instead of being 30 levels, we're thinking it's going to be somewhere around 60 levels. Now this Fame Reward system is something that we're really excited about because we feel that it's the best play to earn opportunity that's currently out there for GameFi. So let me walk you through our thinking here a little bit. Number one is that Compete is free to play, and that'll never change. Number two is that players on pretty much any device, even older, less powerful devices, will be able to boot up and play Compete. And number three is that there's no pay to win here. So you can't buy your way into any sort of advantage in game. We've created a level playing field that everyone can get in for free and have a shot at winning. Now, as I mentioned, the Fame system is going to be 60 levels instead of 30. And you can imagine that those first levels will be pretty easy to unlock. Pretty much everyone will get there if they play. But those last levels, level 55, level 56, all the way through 60, those are going to be pretty tough. To give you an example, that level 60 reward, we're envisioning somewhere between 25 and 50 people get there at the end of the 4 to 6 months. So again, anyone has the opportunity to earn that level 60 reward, but it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of skill. Now, of course, to incentivize people to work through these Fame rewards and really get into it, we have to make those top level rewards really exclusive, really cool, and have a really immediate demand in the secondary marketplace. So again, this is going to be where we're looking to implement partnerships, whether it be with other brands, with other NFT projects, things like that. So again, this is something that we're really excited to offer, this true play to earn opportunity. And what really makes us happy is that we found a way to do it without having to implement any weird tokenomics. So by creating a Fame system and a play to earn system where the rewards are game assets themselves, we can build value into those top-end assets pretty easily through other means, and we don't have to ruin our tokenomics or inflate our supply with some huge amount of tokens to make it happen. All right, now we're in drops, which is the fourth and final way that Compete's going to be introducing new game assets into circulation. And you could see this as very similar to an airdrop system. So if I put in a test code here and I try to claim it, you're going to see that it didn't work. But there are going to be times throughout the week when codes are given out that do work. And we hope to do this in both the digital and the physical space. So to give you a quick example of each, you could imagine Justin being on an AMA over Twitter Spaces with an NFT project. At the end of that AMA, maybe he shouts out a code, and that code is redeemable to the first 200 people that claim it for some collaborative game asset between the NFT project that the AMA is being hosted by and Compete. Now to give you a quick example of the physical space, we'll use the Super Bowl as a big bold example. Of course, we can't ask competitors to go buy Super Bowl tickets to get a Compete game asset. That would be a little bit crazy. But what we are thinking of doing is holding physical events in the real world that allow our community to get together, to engage with each other, and to have fun. And maybe at those events, we give out a code that's redeemable for what we would consider something like a souvenir from the game. So in the case of the Super Bowl, maybe it's Super Bowl themed, but the big vision here is that we want to be able to give out mementos for physical space interactions with the community as well. So that wraps up the 4 places that our game assets are going to be available for players. But of course, those game assets are only so much fun if they're stuck in your account. So let's jump on over to the Bazaar, which is our player-to-player marketplace, and I'll give you a little bit of a backstory as to why this is so important to us. Okay, so you can see that we're now here in the Bazaar. This is our player-to-player secondary marketplace. and is going to be the location where players are able to buy and sell game assets with each other. Of course, for our crypto build, this will be facilitated solely by Compete token, which will be the only way players have to transmit value back and forth. There's a couple reasons for this that we'll get into, but first I want to give you a quick story as to why the Bazaar is so important to Compete. The truth is, as I've mentioned, Justin's a big gamer, but he's also a big collector. He loves collecting those game assets. But it really rubs him the wrong way that every year he buys these assets, whether it be for him or a friend. And at the end of the year, when the new game comes out, they're essentially tossed into a digital dustbin. And so all this money that he's spent in this collection that he's built up becomes worthless pretty much overnight. Now that didn't sit right with him, it never has. And so when we started building Compete, we knew that providing real ownership of game assets and a secondary marketplace for players to trade them was critical to our success. So that's what we've done here. We've built the Bazaar. As you can see, we've got a buy, a sell, and a listed. The UI for this isn't hooked up quite yet, as we're working to integrate that all on our back end. But basically, there's a couple things that you got to know about the Bazaar, and it all boils down to our attempt to reduce friction. Now, the reasons for reducing that friction are pretty simple. The reality is that while it's fun to make a collection of game assets that you've earned from Compete, it's even more fun to trade those with other players, as is evidenced pretty clearly by OpenSea and the huge explosion of NFT trading that's happened. But in order to do that, especially on the Ethereum chain, this Bazaar needs to be optimized so that it's really easy to use, it's really convenient to use, and it's also affordable. So let's start with convenience. Obviously, the Bazaar is built right into the game. So you don't need to leave Compete and go on over to OpenSea or wherever else you might trade NFTs in order to buy and sell Compete game assets. Now, once you get here, of course, it needs to be easy to use. So we've spent a lot of time designing the user interface to provide all the information that a player might want before they buy and sell. That'll include the price history of the exact asset that they're looking to buy or sell, but it'll also include the price history of that asset in general. So to give you an example of a red striped hat, you'll have the price history of that specific red striped hat, but you'll also have the price history of all red striped hats that are circulating in Compete. This clarity should give people a lot of confidence to establish values in the secondary market, and we want it to be really convenient for players to find that information. There's the obvious advantage of the Compete Bazaar that there's only Compete assets that are listed here, so everything that you look at and you see listed here, you know can be used in the game. Compare that to something like OpenSea where you got to dig around, use the search function, and you're never quite sure if you've seen everything. Now, the last friction that we really want to make sure we address is that of cost. Because obviously if something's not cost efficient, it's not going to be as widely used. Finances are a big motivator of people's decision making. And being that we chose the Ethereum chain, it's something that we obviously really need to address and look at. And it's something that we've thought a lot about. So you might be wondering, why did we choose the Ethereum blockchain? Well, Justin and I are pretty big believers that the Ethereum chain is going to win out as the blockchain of choice moving into the future. There's also the most opportunity for development on it currently. There's the most resources, and the most people use it. So for us, it was a pretty clear decision, but we did need to make sure that what we did in the Bazaar was cost effective for our players. So there's a couple places where we're going to address that price friction and try to reduce it as much as possible. Number one is with Compete token specifically. So as you probably know, if you're watching this video, Compete token right now has a buy and a sell tax of 10%. If you're watching this sometime in the future, chances are it's been lowered. But just know that our end vision is to bring this tax down to zero as soon as we can. The only reason that we have it up there right now is because it's generating all of the revenue that we need to develop the game and run the marketing for Compete. But as we introduce these new additional revenue sources, the tax for that Compete token is going to come down significantly, and eventually we hope to bring it to zero and list Compete token on centralized exchanges. So our end vision is to make Compete token super accessible for all players and really easy to get. Secondly, we have the transaction costs that come with Ethereum. Those transaction costs would traditionally happen when a player lists their item for sale or when they buy an item that's listed. Now, to address this, we're going to have to get a little more creative, and so we're looking at a number of different layer 2 solutions for Ethereum. The two that we're looking at most closely are an optimistic rollup or some sort of sidechain solution. Now, the specific details of how this is all going to work are still very much in the planning phases. One thing to keep in mind with all this talk of layer 2, just know going forward that Compete token is going to do everything possible that we need to in order to preserve Compete token as the sole currency that's used on the Bazaar. Of course, we'll keep the community up to date through this whole development process and give you the latest news as it comes to us. But for now, the main thing that you got to know is that it is a big priority for us, and it's something that we're actively looking at. Next, we'll head back to career, and we'll start to take a look at the stats. Alright, back in career, where of course our fame progression system is located. But if you were observant earlier, you probably noticed this stats as well. This is the last major component of Compete, something that we're really excited about. So you can see here we've got a whole bunch of different stats, all the normal stuff like games played, win percentage, but we've also got stuff like your average weight played, your average height played, your favorite article of clothing, and you can see that it's broken down specifically by game mode as well. So we hope to offer players a whole bunch of different statistics that give them an inside look as to how they've progressed over time. You can see here we've got lifetime and season. And through these stats, really start to build out that gaming legacy so that they can compare with their friends. Lastly, we'll head on over to leaderboards and I'll show you exactly how this works. Alright, so here we are in the leaderboards. Basically, we want players to know at any given time exactly how they stack up against the competition. We know that leaderboards are super sticky, and if you get into it and you start trying to climb those leaderboards, you're much more likely to stick around. And of course, we want players to have plenty of reasons to stick around, so we've decided that these leaderboards are super important to us. Alright, so let's head back to the lobby and we'll close this up. Alright, so we're back in the lobby here. Thanks for hanging out with us on this tour. Just a couple of points to summarize before we close this out. Of course, at this point, we've given you a lay of the land, and you've seen all the different features and functionalities in Compete through a tour of our menus. But before we sign off, I want to come back to the reason that we built Compete and what we're really trying to do here, because I think it ties it all together. Now, as I mentioned throughout this video, Justin is a lifetime gamer. He started gaming when he was real young in middle school, and he continues to game to this day. And the reason for that, it's not the wins, it's not the assets collected, but it's the friends that he's had along the way. Justin uses gaming, like a lot of people, to stay in touch with people that he might not otherwise see, might not otherwise be able to connect with. And so gaming really does give him that opportunity to maintain those relationships that are important to him. The problem right now with gaming, and sports games specifically, is that, as I mentioned, the doors to the gym are locked. There's a couple of sports monopolies that have a total control over the market, and they don't care about their customers. They don't care about their players. They don't care about their community. They're focused solely on making profits for their shareholders. They force you to buy the game every year, even though almost nothing changes. They charge you for game assets that you don't actually own, you can't actually trade, and that turn to digital dust as soon as the New Year's game come out. And they don't offer any opportunity for players to play with their friends unless those friends have the exact same device as them. Now, Justin's as stubborn as anyone as I've ever met, and that's a good thing, by the way. And so when he realized that all these problems were something that could be solved in one game, he decided to push all of his chips into the middle, to take a chance, and to try to build something that was going to solve all these problems that he was having and that sports gaming in general was having. And so that was, and still is, the foundational vision of Compete. We're trying to build a game that everyone can play, regardless of what device they have, regardless of how much money they have, and give them the opportunity to play their favorite sports games at a level that's just as competitive and just as fun as those monopolies are providing. Of course, we've provided game asset ownership, which is going to allow people not only to collect the game assets that allow them to create whoever they want to be, but also to trade those assets on the Bazaar, creating a real play-to-earn opportunity for all players in Compete. By offering all these things, Justin and the rest of the team here at Modernized Games, we're going to be providing something of real value to the gaming community and something that's really going to shake up the gaming industry. So stick with us. Of course, we'll continue to add new game modes as we grow. And in general, there's so much to look forward to in the future that we really feel like we're just getting started. So if you're watching this, you're super early here, and I'll be the first to tell you, your support means everything. 20 months ago when we started building this game, we weren't sure if anyone was ever going to see it. There was a lot of risk involved, there was a lot of uncertainty, and so to have launched our game, brought it public, and had the reception that we do, has really, really been humbling and means the world to us. Right now, we're living out our dream of building this game, and it's all thanks to your support. So thank you so much. I hope you stick with us. Plenty more updates to come. This is going to wrap up the Alpha Tour for now. Again, thank you so much for watching. This is Ethan, signing out, and we'll catch you later. Thanks, guys.